All right, let's jump right into today's explainer. We are tackling one of the most intellectually dense, yet absolutely fascinating theories in international relations, Alexander Wendt's constructivist theory of international politics. We're going to look specifically at how massive structural change actually happens. Like, how do the deeply entrenched cultures of global politics shift over time? You see, it isn't just about who has the biggest military. It's really about how states perceive themselves and, crucially, how they perceive each other.
So it begs the question, can rival nations truly become friends? We so often picture massive geopolitical states as being permanently trapped in this sort of endless dog-eat-dog state of nature. Realists will always tell you to watch your back. But how could these massive entities ever move from being bitter, survival-obsessed enemies to actually trusting friends? Well, Wendt argues that this evolution isn't just some utopian pipe dream. It's a very real, structural process that we can actually map out.
Here's the roadmap for our explainer today. 1. Escaping the Hobbesian trap. 2. Two views of social process. 3. How state identities evolve. 4. Creating a collective identity. And finally, 5. 4 variables for change. Let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this with Section 1, Escaping the Hobbesian Trap, or Moving from Enemies to Friends. To figure out where international relations are heading, we first kind of have to look at the historical evolution of world systems. For a huge chunk of human history, states lived in what's called a Hobbesian culture. Basically, your role was enemy, and the logic was brutally simple: kill or be killed. But eventually, the world underwent this massive structural shift to a Lockean system. Think of states here as rivals. You're still competing, sure, but you actually recognize each other's basic sovereignty and right to exist. You don't just completely wipe each other off the map. Fast forward to today, and the modern system is slowly, kind of tentatively, inching toward a Kantian ideal. This is where states view each other as friends and operate on the principle of collective security. And that brings us to this incredibly powerful, famous thesis from Wendt. Anarchy is what states make of it. Literally, what does that mean? It means the deep structure of international politics isn't just hardwired by nature. The fact that there's no global 911 you can call doesn't automatically mean states have to destroy each other. This whole culture of anarchy is an ongoing accomplishment. The system is what it is purely because states continuously act it out every single day.
Moving on to Section 2, Two Views of Social Process. How does change actually happen?
So if a culture just constantly reinforces itself, how do things ever change? How can states build a brand new culture when the old one is practically screaming at them to just reproduce those old, self-interested ways? Well, we have a major theoretical divide here. Rationalism basically argues that state identities are exogenously given. That's a fancy way of saying states already know exactly who they are, usually self-interested egoists, long before they even interact. They just tweak their behavior based on the expected costs or prices in their environment. But constructivism, which is what Wendt champions, argues that identities are endogenous. The actual boundaries of the self are shaped and produced by the interaction itself. Literally, in the process of cooperating or fighting, states are changing who they are. Which leads us to Section 3, How State Identities Evolve, taking a look at the logics of selection.
To wrap our heads around how states pick up these deep-seated traits over time, we can look at it a bit like biology. State traits evolve through two totally distinct kinds of selection. First, you've got natural selection, good old survival of the fittest. 3,000 years ago, this harsh material logic absolutely bred Hobbesian egoists, mostly because the weak simply died out or were conquered. But here's the catch. Modern states rarely actually die. Even incredibly weak states survive today because the international institution of sovereignty acts as a shield for them. So since basic survival is relatively easy now, cultural selection takes the wheel. We're talking imitation, social learning, the sharing of ideas that is the real driver of state identity today.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the concept of reflected appraisals. Think of it like walking into a crowded party. You kind of figure out your role in that room by mirroring how people treat you, or appraise you, right? Well, it's the exact same thing for states. If another state treats you like an enemy, you internalize that appraisal and boom, you act like an enemy. The self-fulfilling prophecy takes hold. But if they start treating you like a friend, over time, you slowly learn a completely new cooperative identity.
All right, Section 4, Creating a Collective Identity, or Redefining the We.
The ultimate prize here, the holy grail of shifting from a Lockean rivalry to a Kantian friendship, is moving past pure self-interest to form a collective identity. This is where states make the welfare of the entire group the goal itself. But we have to talk about the massive hurdle standing in the way, which is the innate fear of being engulfed. Seriously, identifying with others means you have to put their needs right alongside your own. And in an anarchic system with no global police force, doing that is terrifying. States are absolutely petrified of losing their autonomy, or worse, getting played by free riders if they let their guard down.
And that brings us to Section 5, 4 variables for change. Let's look at the actual mechanics of friendship.
We are now going to reveal Wendt's master variables. How do we actually get past that paralyzing fear? Wendt gives us the exact mechanics that transform Lockean rivals into Kantian friends: interdependence, common fate, homogeneousness, and self-restraint. Now the first three, they're what we call active causes. They physically or socially push states together. But the fourth one, self-restraint, that is the absolutely crucial enabler. Let's break these down real quick.
First up is interdependence. This is basically a setup where the outcome for one state relies heavily on what the others choose to do. When interaction density is incredibly high, like deeply integrated global economies, states are actually forced to engage in symbolic ideological labor. They literally have to sit down, talk, negotiate, and consciously rebrand themselves as a we just to manage their tangled networks.
Next is common fate. Now you've got to distinguish this from independence, because a common fate is usually slapped onto states by an outside force. It's when your individual survival depends entirely on what happens to the group as a whole. Think of a massive shared external military threat or something global like climate change. It forces actors to band together because, hey, they are quite literally in the exact same boat facing the exact same existential threat.
Then we have homogeneity. This means states actually start becoming alike in their corporate form or their regime type, like a block of democratic or capitalist nations. Being alike drastically cuts down on conflicts that are usually driven by internal differences. But I should point out, just becoming alike isn't always a magic fix. Sometimes it even triggers this weird narcissism of small differences, where states get hyper-focused on tiny little disagreements specifically because they are otherwise so similar. So the crucial point is this fourth variable, self-restraint. This is the ultimate, absolute foundation for a collective identity. Because listen, all the interdependence and common fate in the universe won't mean a thing if states think they're going to get exploited the second they turn their backs. By voluntarily holding ourselves back, actually proving we won't exploit our peers even when we totally have the power to do it, we build trust. And that is exactly what enables other states to step forward without that paralyzing fear of being engulfed. Let's move to the next step and see how this builds in the real world. How do states actually signal, hey, I'm holding myself back? Wendt gives us 3 pathways. First, reciprocal learning over time. Basically, slowly building trust through repeated, consistent interactions where nobody takes advantage. Second, transposing domestic norms. This is like democratic states, taking their internal, peaceful ways of resolving conflict and bringing them onto the global stage. And third, unilateral self-binding initiatives, making that incredibly brave first move to physically tie your own hands just to definitively prove your good intentions.
Which leaves us with a pretty massive, provocative question. Take a good look at the international landscape today. Are our modern global powers truly ready to hold themselves back, to build a real collective identity? Can we actually exercise the profound self-restraint required for perpetual peace? Or is that ancient, deep-seated fear of being engulfed going to keep us trapped as rivals forever? It really is the defining question of our time. Thanks for joining me on The Explainer today. Keep questioning the systems around you, and I'll catch you next time.